I don't like Rosie Duffield. Nobody in my chat likes Rosie Duffield. We're all big Rosie Duffield critics. Now, what I will say, as a caveat before we get into this story, is that it is very possible to be very transphobic and also think that child poverty is bad, that to think that standards in politics should be high, and to think that the Labour Party should be somewhat democratic. These are all important things to understand, so that a lot of people have said, oh, she's terrible, she's right-wing. And I'm like, well, she did sign the letter about the 2-child benefit cap that was signed by the Greens and the Independents. It's clear that she thinks a lot of what the current Labour leadership are doing is bad. So I think it is worth taking this within its own context rather than within the wider context of how much that we really, really, really dislike Rosie Duffield for other reasons. So Rosie Duffield has resigned from the Labour Party. She is now sitting as an independent MP. And I hate to say it, chat. I really hate to say it. But she cooked. She released a letter publicly for everyone to read for criticisms of the current leadership. And she doesn't even indeed mention the thing that she's most known for. Maybe she wants to kind of change her branding a little bit. Even so, she absolutely cooks Keir Starmer in this letter. So let's have a read and see what she had to say in her resignation. Sir Keir, usually letters like this begin, it is with a heavy heart. Mine has been increasingly heavy and conflicted and has longed for a degree of relief. I can no longer stay a Labour MP under your management of the party, and this letter is my notice that I wish to resign the Labour Party whip with immediate effect. Although many last straws have led to my decision, my reason for leaving now is the programme of policies you seem determined to stick to, however unpopular they are with the electorate and even your own MPs. You repeat often that you will make tough decisions and the country is all in this together, but those decisions do not directly affect any one of us in Parliament. They are cruel and unnecessary and affect hundreds of thousands of our poorest, most vulnerable constituents. Exactly. It's not a tough decision to do it when there's no political pushback from any of the people who actually have vested interest in the Labour Party, whether it be MPs or hangers-on or donors. This is not a tough decision, and she's right to make this criticism. And she's also right to point out that it is very unpopular with the electorate and even with her own MPs as well, despite how many of them applaud when Rachel Reeves tried to corral them in a meeting before the vote in Parliament. Anyway, the unions hate it, the members hate it, a lot of the PLP hate it, all of the opposition parties disagree with it as well. So they are just the lone island with everybody hating them from the entire political spectrum. This is not what I was elected to do. It is not even wise politics, and it certainly is not the politics of service. I did not vote for you to lead our party for reasons I won't describe in detail here. But as someone elevated immediately to a shadow cabinet position, without following the usual path of honing your political skills on the backbenches, you had very little previous political footprint. It was therefore unclear what your political passions, drive, or direction might be as the leader of the Labour Party, a large movement of people united by a desire for social justice and support for those most in need. This is the absolute pinnacle of how hard she cooked Keir Starmer in this particular letter. Because it's true. He was inserted as an MP in 2015 in Holborn and St Pancras because he had legal knowledge and they wanted him to be potentially Ed Miliband's Attorney General if they won the election in 2015. He didn't want to get into politics. He had no political raison d'etre. He was only there as a parachute candidate to be a potential Attorney General in case Ed Miliband won the election in 2015. He doesn't have any political skills. We all know this. We've seen him in interviews. He looks very kind of stilted and weird when being questioned. He doesn't like being questioned. He can't speak to the population. He has no charisma. So it's clear that he's not spent any time on the backbenches being politically astute. No, he's not. Basically, the only reason he managed to get put forward for a shadow cabinet position is because no one else in the PLP would do it under Jeremy Corbyn. And, of course, because in 2017 he was approached in the background by Labour Together to be their potential leadership candidate to try and oust the Corbynites. And so needed to get an in with the membership, so was therefore happy to accept positions in Jeremy Corbyn's cabinet, in the shadow cabinet, so that he could look like he wasn't anti-Corbyn for later when they were standing for the leadership to try and oust the Corbynites. And this is how he has no political passion or drive or direction, because his drive and direction is being steered in the background by somebody else. By the Politburo, by the people from Labour Together. He's an empty suit doing the whims of the people behind him, and he doesn't have any genuine beliefs or convictions at all. And this one particular paragraph is incredibly scathing. Incredibly scathing. And it is something that you're not going to hear elsewhere. Because you've got to remember, Rosie Duffield was elected in 2017, and whilst Rosie Duffield was incredibly critical of Jeremy Corbyn and joined in on the anti-Semitism smear campaigns, she at least joined a Labour Party in which the democracy internally within the party was respected. And that doesn't exist anymore. Whether or not you liked Corbyn as a leader or not, you have to admit that internal party democracy is preferable to internal party dictatorship. As she says here, you made the choice not to speak up at once about the Labour Party's problems with anti-Semitism during your time in the shadow cabinet, leaving that to the backbenchers, including new MPs such as me. So people on Twitter were saying, oh, she's going to join the Independent Alliance. No. First of all, they wouldn't accept a TERF. And second of all, because she was very open in the joining in the anti-Semitism smear campaign against Jeremy Corbyn. Like, she was very happy to throw her own leadership under the bus for a concocted smear campaign that we now know was agitated by the Starmer camp in the background. The Labour Together people were happily colluding with the press to publish pretty dubious stories about Labour and left-wing anti-Semitism, or trying to pin it on Jeremy Corbyn or the Labour Party. Since you took office as leader of the opposition, you have used various heavy-handed management tactics but have never shown what most experienced backbenchers would recognise as true or inspiring leadership. Stop! He's already dead! You have never regularly engaged with your own backbench MPs, many of whom have been in Parliament far longer than you, and some of whom served under the previous Labour government. It's true. It's 100% true. She's not wrong. She isn't wrong with that statement. Because again, the Politburo think that they essentially can run on democratic centralism. They won the leadership election, therefore everybody has to get in line, rather than any dissent should be crushed. You have chosen neither to seek our individual political opinions, nor learn about our constituency experience, nor our specific or collective areas of political knowledge. We clearly have nothing you deem to be of value. It's true. Your promotion of those with no proven political skills and no previous parliamentary experience, but all who happen to be related to those close to you or even to each other, is frankly embarrassing. In particular, the recent treatment of Diane Abbott, now Mother of the House, was deeply shameful and led to comments from voters across the political spectrum. A woman of her political stature and place in history is deserving of respect and support, regardless of political differences. Very true. Again, yeah, it's because the Politburo think that they can control everything, from selections to the motions to the policies. Everything has to go centrally throughout the Politburo rather than being done democratically and by bringing people in rather than dictating to them. And of course, hence why they thought they could get away with the expulsion of Diane Abbott or trying to strong harm her into quitting. And that bungling of that made her untouchable and has made other MPs untouchable now as well. As Prime Minister, your managerial and technocratic approach and lack of basic politics and political instincts have come crashing down on us as a party after we worked so hard, promised so much, and waited a long 14 years to be mandated by the British public to return to power. Since the change of government in July, the revelations of hypocrisy have been staggering and increasingly outrageous. I cannot put into words how angry I and my colleagues are at your total lack of understanding about how you have made us all appear. I mean, it's true. How dare you take our longed-for victory, the electorate's sacred and precious trust, and throw it back in our individual faces and the faces of the dedicated and hard-working Labour MPs. The sleaze, nepotism and apparent avarice are off the scale. I am so ashamed of what you and your inner circle have done to tarnish and humiliate our once proud party. Next, she'll tell us what she really thinks. Someone with far above average wealth choosing to keep the Conservatives' two-child limit to benefit payments which entrenches children in poverty, while inexplicably accepting expensive personal gifts of designer suits and glasses costing more than most of those people can grasp, this is entirely undeserving of hold the title of Labour Prime Minister. Facts. Forcing a vote to make many older people iller and colder while you and your favourite colleagues enjoy free family trips to events most people would have to save hard for, why are you not showing even the slightest bit of embarrassment or remorse? I now have no confidence in your commitment to deliver the so-called change you promised during the election campaign and the changes we have been striving for as a political party for over a decade. What I will say is interesting is that this wasn't hidden. This wasn't hidden during the election campaign, Rosie. Interesting that you felt like you were happy to plant your flag on this when they were clear about the fact they were going to be like this in the election campaign and are now being like this in government. Interesting that you were very happy to do this to try and get into a position as an MP on a Labour ticket, only to dump it at the last minute. Just a thought. My values are those of a democratic socialist Labour Party, and I have been elected 3 times to act on the values on behalf of my constituents. Canterbury made history when it voters elected their first woman and only non-Conservative MP since the seat was created in the 13th century. Yeah, you can thank Jeremy Corbyn for that one, not you. My constituents elected an independent-minded MP who vowed to put constituency before party and to keep tackling the issues that most affect us here: Brexit fallout, funding for our universities, our desperately struggling East Kent NHS, dire housing situation, repeated sewage pollution, and protecting our vital green spaces. I mean, this is literally no word of a lie. No word of a lie here. And it's interesting that in all of the things that she chose to excoriate the Prime Minister over, in the entirety of this letter, it's unusually magnanimous of her to not mention trans people once, which is quite funny to me. I am confident that I can continue to do so as an independent MP, guided by my core Labour values. Sadly, the Labour Party has never shown any interest in my wonderful constituency in the 7 years that I have been in Parliament, but I am proud of my community and will continue to serve them to the best of my ability. Now, this is where it gets a little bit iffy. Your wonderful constituency? Your wonderful constituency? Like, saying things, I couldn't look my constituents in the face. Yeah, you can't look at your constituents in the face, Rosie, because you live in North Wales. It's not your community, but there you go. My constituents care deeply about social issues such as child poverty and helping those who cannot help themselves. I will continue to uphold those values as I pledged to do so when I first stood for them on election in 2017. I mean, it's not like she's wrong. What's funny as well about all of this is that she constantly, from the backbenches, whilst Keir Starmer was leader of the Labour Party, constantly debate the leadership into being far more transphobic, into taking far more of a gender-critical position. And they kept abating her. They kept giving her what she wanted. They kept conceding ground over and over and over and over again to her because they're scared of her. When Lonabox spoke to a Keir Starmer staffer about 3 years ago now, quite a while back, and we discussed the issues of transphobia within the Labour Party and people like Rosie Duffield, and how we thought that it was completely ridiculous that Jeremy Corbyn could have the whip taken away for justifiably saying that the EHRC report and the claims of Labour anti-Semitism were exaggerated by forces both inside and outside the party. The scale was exaggerated for political reasons. That got his whip suspended, yet all of the things that Rosie Duffield has done and said about trans people, none of this was bad enough for her to have the whip taken away. None of this was bad enough for the whip to be taken away from her. And this staffer for Keir Starmer essentially said to us that the leadership was scared of her, that the leadership was scared of the gender criticals in the party, and so they just kept having to placate them rather than actually take a position against them and stand up for trans people. We've seen that in terms of policy. And so after all of that, after all of the ground that they have ceded to her, to allow her this easy out to quit the party over genuine statements that show the moral rot at the heart of the Starmer project, just how pathetic is it? How embarrassing is it? And think of all of the trans people who will never vote Labour again. I am certainly one of them. I will never vote Labour again, not as long as I live, unless something drastic changes. All to placate a single MP who's just left anyway because of legitimate reasons over the conduct of the Starmer Politburo and the policies they've tried to do when they're in government. What's even funnier is that there are genuine Labour centrists out here who are managing to take the worst position possible on all of this. Like, this one tweet sums up a bunch of Labour centrist reactions to this. Disappointing, given how much some of us have defended and supported Rosie Duffield. In reality, it turns out she's just another ungrateful, self-serving MP who's only in it for herself. And how incredible it is. The absolute mind-bending, space-time continuum warping pretzels that you have to twist yourself into to try and somehow say, well, actually, what was justified was placating her over transphobia and defending how much of a transphobe she was, continually defending her while she said some egregious, awful, dehumanizing stuff about trans people, and saying, we've defended and supported her in the wake of all of the terrible attacks from the TRAs, only to then, when she finally grows a backbone and a spine and defends genuine suffering in this country by excoriating the Prime Minister over the means test of the winter fuel payment that everybody hates, and the two-child benefit cap that keeps 250,000 little kids, like tiny little children, in poverty. And suddenly you think, well, now she's self-serving, not when she was trying to essentially turn Labour into anti-trans party. The real thing was when she was trying to stop children from starving. It's literally the meme. It's like, well, no, I can excuse transphobia, but I draw the line trying to prevent child poverty. And again, because all these people care about is party loyalty. All they care about is party loyalty. Principles? What are those? They're very happy to incinerate their principles about equality and about social justice when it comes to trans people to protect Rosie Duffield. But as soon as she has a principle that they don't like, a principle where it's maybe we shouldn't allow children to starve, Sir Kid Starver, suddenly, well, she's a self-serving and ungrateful MP. Just genuinely pathetic actions from these people. Totally pathetic. Genuinely insane. I don't get how anyone can think her letter was self-serving. She's speaking the sentiment of the entire country, regardless of how disingenuous she is. 100%. 100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And the thing is, you know why they think it's self-serving? They think it's self-serving because they genuinely believe that the MPs who get mad about stuff like the removal of internal party democracy, or Starmer Politburo setting everything centrally, or the fact that this is a man with no political experience who malevolent forces in the background essentially orchestrated his rise to power. How getting angry at this, because in their mind, this is what put Labour into government. Getting mad at that is self-serving rather than, just the upholding of the principle of internal party democracy. They just can't grasp it. They cannot grasp the fact that some people think that party democracy is good. So they're literally out here trying to defend transphobia while getting mad at wanting the Labour leader to not be a charisma vacuum, to not take gigantic donations from a rich mate during cost of living crisis, and not to plunge children and pensioners into poverty unnecessarily. Democratic Socialist Party, Jesus Christ. I would usually at this point is where I'd say just go and join the Liberal Democrats, but the Liberal Democrats think that transphobia is bad, and the Liberal Democrats think that child poverty is bad. At this point, it's just join the Conservatives. At this point, you might as well join Reform UK. Oh wait, no, we can't do that because Reform UK also think that cutting the winter fuel payment is bad. Reform UK and Nigel Farage also think that the two-child benefit cap is bad. Right? These people have fewer principles than Nigel Farage. They have fewer principles than Suella fucking Braverman. I ask you, Jesus. Your Labour Party of 2024, it's so bad, it's gotten me agreeing with Rosie Duffield. Wholeheartedly agreeing with Rosie Duffield outside of the comments about Labour anti-Semitism. So Owen Jones was on LBC today with Natasha Devon to discuss the issue. Let's listen in.
Columnist and, of course, a historical supporter of the Labour Party for pretty much your entire life, your entire career. But just before the most recent general election, you rescinded your membership. What was the moment for you?
What was the moment? I think overall it was the fact that there was no chance of turning things around because the people around Keir Starmer are just so authoritarian that any chance of having a different vision for the country just wasn't possible anymore. But I think in terms of totemic big moments for me, I think Keir Starmer on LBC saying Israel had the right to cut off water and energy to a civilian population, which he later claimed he'd never believed, but he said it. The fact that he abandoned the key policies of his leadership platform in what I think was the most dishonest leadership campaign in history. He campaigned for things like increasing taxes on the rich, ruled out. Public ownership of energy and water and other utilities, they were ruled out. Abolishing tuition fees. Today in the Times newspaper, it's been revealed that Labour plan to hike tuition fees by another £1,500 to £10,500 a year. Or the fact that he went...
I think it's worth pointing out that it's not a gigantic rise, given that in inflationary terms, in real terms, tuition fees are now lower than what they were when they were initially hiked to £9,000, even with the increase of £1,000. But it's a Nick Clegg moment. It's a clear Nick Clegg moment. You get elected on a promise to get rid of university tuition fees, to abolish them completely. That was your pledge in your list of pledges in the leadership election. And now you're here raising them. It doesn't matter that it's still less in real terms than it was in 2010. The money's worth less because of inflation. That is true. But you gotta admit, the optics are bad. It's just another Nick Clegg moment where you try and get elected on a platform of saying you're going to abolish them and actually increase them anyway. And he will get rightly crucified for it. He will absolutely rightly get crucified for it. And young people, again, there are plenty of young people who joined the Labour Party and potentially even voted for Keir Starmer as leader of the Labour Party because of the belief in the removal of university tuition fees. And now they're seeing them go up.
went on television, and this is something alluded to by Rosie Duffield in her quite astonishing letter, I have to say, which is when he went on television to say that he would keep a 2-child benefit cap, which imposes poverty on 250,000 children and drives hundreds of thousands of other already impoverished children further into hardship. And do you know what? I was never going to get the moon. And, some people say, you want the moon on a stick. People are going, he just wants radical pie in the sky stuff. He can't compromise. It's not true. I'm a socialist, and I wasn't going to get socialism from Keir Starmer. I never thought that. But just a little bit of social democracy, just a crumb of social democracy. And when you have a Labour Prime Minister, which is what, and I have very strong disagreements with Rosie Duffield, but the fact she said in her letter, a Labour Prime Minister who is getting £100,000 worth of freebies from rich donors and organisations, more than every Labour leader put together since 1997, Blair onwards, whilst imposing hardship on pensioners by attacking the winter fuel payments. And that will lead to both pensioners on pension credit who don't get it, as well as many others just above the threshold, potentially freezing to death in their homes, and imposing child poverty, booting out 7 Labour MPs who voted against Tory benefit cuts to those children, whilst just living up the high life with a standard of living beyond the dreams of most people, with a salary that puts him already in the top 1%, but that's not enough. He has to have his clothes and his glasses bought for him by a rich donor. It is just nauseating. And
The party of working people, everybody. That's the party of working people. The party led by the Knight of the Realm, who accept tens of thousands of pounds worth of free gifts from a millionaire sugar daddy who got rich by owning a company that paid people shit wages, who takes money away from poor pensioners and starving children. It is so funny. Like, the Labour right thought that they could placate the press, and then they get into government and they're getting monstered by them, and you got what you wanted, mate. All the Labour centrists go, I can't believe that they're smearing the dear leader. And I'm just like, did you remember the Jeremy Corbyn years? Did you not remember the times that Jeremy Corbyn was continually shredded, and not with genuine real criticism like Keir Starmer is getting, but over nonsense shit like having a Chairman Mao style bicycle, or the Daily Mail printing fucking fan fiction about how Jeremy Corbyn's Labour would destroy Britain and how they were going to collectivise farms or reopen Auschwitz. Like, the genuine insane things people said about Jeremy Corbyn. Or what, someone's got some criticisms about Keir Starmer. No! Oh, heaven forbid that they take the piss out of the smart man in the suit. Oh, the adults are in the room, I thought. How dare they? You got what you wanted, mate. We could have actually had a Labour Party that stood up to our poisonous press infrastructure in this country, and you tried to destroy it. You joined in the press at destroying him. You got what you wanted. You got what you fucking wanted.
I said before, when I resigned back in March, was Labour going to win because the Tories destroyed themselves? And no democratic government in British history has been so catastrophic as the last Tory government. It destroyed itself. Labour was handed the election on a plate. And my own view is people wanted actual change, that if they'd offered a transformative vision, asking those who are rich to pay more so we can invest in our public services, not driving pensioners into poverty, the bar really is on the floor here, then I think they could have done that and they could have won. But instead, they got their mandate, albeit on a lot lower share of the vote than they expected, 33.7% of the vote, with the lowest turnout in the history of British democracy. And they've already just thrown it away by toxifying themselves with the electorate because they're in the pockets of very rich people and they don't want fundamental change, which would mean asking wealthy people to pay more tax. That is already leading to an unprecedented collapse after an election for a new party in government. And I just think I saw this coming because I know who these people are. I've been around the Labour Party for a long time. They don't have a vision. They don't have a soul, politically speaking. They don't have any clear principles. They're self-advancing careerists. And by putting themselves literally ahead of the country, to coin a phrase, careers first, country second.
I mean, don't hold back, Owen. Jesus. But I mean, he's just literally 100% not wrong. They thought they could get away with it because they're high on their own supply. They thought they could get away with it because they felt like they were untouchable. They had the Murdoch endorsement. They had the endorsement of all of these different right-wing papers. They were flying high on the backs of Tory failure. And they didn't think that the public would ever be able to hold them to account. They felt like they were untouchable. That lasted long, didn't it? They had no plan B. They had no plan B for their orchestrated, let's get into government, say the Tories screwed things up, and then do the means test we wanted to do 10 years ago and say we didn't want to do it, right? They were all geared up. They were all prepared to rerun Cameron Osborne 2010 rhetorically to justify this, and no one was picking up what they were putting down. Because they don't understand. They were too busy listening to their inner circle of advisors going, well, none of us cared in 2015 after the Cameron administration did all of this stuff, right? We were all people who are unaffected, and we only need to care about the votes of people who are unaffected, whilst realising that broad swathes of our country were affected and did care and do oppose austerity. And so they can't just do it again. People are sick of this. Boris Johnson was more politically astute than Keir Starmer was in trying to understand where the electorate was. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party ran on big investment, big spending politics because they knew the austerity era was over. And that rhetoric didn't have any credence in 2020. But now it's 2024. The rhetoric still has no credence. But the Starmer Politburo, they're living in 2015. They're living in 2015 so much. They are so living in 2015 that they rehash their old beef from the leadership election. Like, the reason why they were so intent on having a specific vote over the two-child benefit cap and why they really wanted to make it a political point to kick out certain members of the PLP, remove the whip, is because this was one of the key fulcrums with which Jeremy Corbyn engineered his victory in the leadership election in 2015, because people opposed the fact that Harriet Harman abstained on Osborne's welfare bill as interim leader. This collapse and them trying to screw over Andy Burnham in the background to get 4% Liz in the McSweeney campaign to win that, them screwing over Andy Burnham is what gifted all the political capital to Jeremy Corbyn to oppose austerity, to oppose welfare cuts, to oppose the kind of winter fuel means tests that these people are obsessed with doing. And so they said, well, Jeremy Corbyn won because he opposed the two-child benefit cap when all the other three leaders in 2015 leadership election all supported the two-child benefit cap or admitted defeat on the two-child benefit cap, and Jeremy Corbyn won because of it. They wanted to have a symbolic moment. They wanted to have a symbolic moment with which to excise the demons of 2015. So what you essentially have, 250,000 little children in this country going hungry because people in the Starmer Politburo wanted to settle some 10-year-old beef with the left of the party. 250,000 children. Like, these people are monsters. Like, if you can't look at what these people are doing and how they act and the way they comport themselves and the things that they do in government, if you can look at these people and not think that they're monsters, we just live on a completely different moral spectrum. A completely different moral spectrum we live on. I will never understand you. I will never understand your approach to politics if you look at the acts of this government since they have come in, the way in which they have carried themselves in politics, and just not think they're monsters. I don't get it. I just don't get it. And you know what? I'm really glad that Rosie Duffield doesn't include any mention of trans people in her letter. I don't want anybody reading this letter from the media class and thinking it's about divisions over trans people, because it wasn't. Well, first of all, because they've accepted her framing anyway, but second of all, because, as Scribby points out in chat, the letter is saying in print what we knew all along, and that is what makes it a shot across the bows, which they will ignore, of course. And they cannot report on this incident without properly understanding the forces at play in the background in the party that got Keir Starmer to where he is. This is the biggest part of Rosie Duffield's letter, and the most important part. The most important part of the letter is her calling out the Politburo at the top. And she's right to call it out. And I'm so glad that she focused on this rather than anything else, because this cannot be ignored. It will be ignored, but it shouldn't be.
They've led to this disaster, and I hate that because I wanted a Labour government that actually do what the Labour Party was founded to do.
Do you think, I appreciate everything you say about the optics of this story being published about Starmer's Garm drama, which I am going to call it, and the two-child benefit cap and the winter fuel allowance, which, undoubtedly there is an agenda by the right-wing press to bring these things to the fore, but two things can be true at once, and the optics of that aren't great, and arguably, the Labour Party should have done better in not allowing that to happen. But do you think it's fair to judge them on the 2-child benefit cap and the winter fuel allowance before Rachel Reeves' budget, because it may very well be that there are other announcements which mean that ultimately families in poverty and low-earning pensioners might end up better off.
Yes, they started their government at the very outset by making it clear that they were going to impose continued or new hardship on children and pensioners. And that's a Labour government doing that. What a Labour government, the first thing they should do, look, whatever wing of the Labour Party you're from, whatever my disagreements with Gordon Brown, he cared about child poverty. You know, he might not have had the policies as sweeping and transformative as I would have liked to deal with it, but there was supposed to be a consensus that you don't impose poverty on children if you're in the Labour Party. And from doing that at the absolute outset, and you say, well, there might be other measures. No other single policy generates as much poverty for children than the 2-child benefit cap. If you want to do the one thing to, a stroke, take children out of poverty, that's the policy that you start with. But they not only said they were going to keep it as things stood, they kicked out 7 principled Labour MPs who said, well, actually, we can't, with our conscience as Labour MPs, vote this way. And, you know, the point you make about the right-wing media, I have less than no sympathy here, less than no sympathy, because the whole point of the Starmer project was to go, we are going to bend over backwards to do everything we can to do basically what the right-wing media want. We will go on about immigrants. We will abandon any policies that redistribute wealth and power. We will get the endorsement of the Sun newspaper. And just on the eve of the election, Keir Starmer lauded the Sun supporting the Labour Party. They did.
He wrote articles in the Sun newspaper. He went on their little never mind the ballots thing with Harry Cole. He openly accepted time with the Sun newspaper and then has the absolute barefaced cheek to talk about the 97 in the Labour Party conference. The absolute temerity, the brass neck of this fucker to schmooze the people at the Sun newspaper and then go to a conference in Liverpool to talk about the 97. Shameful, and shameless. A shameless man.
Did everything they could, and they thought that if they no longer posed a threat to wealthy people in society because they weren't going to touch their wealth and just going to allow them to get richer and richer while other people struggle, that they wouldn't get any more big attacks from the right-wing media. Well, look what's happened now. They have been, you know, I just cannot have sympathy for a part of leadership which discarded the most basic principles of the Labour Party to get the support of the right-wing media and then got devoured by them anyway. And I have to say, just finally on that, Ed Miliband got done over for eating a bacon sandwich by the right-wing media. Jeremy Corbyn got done over, amongst other things, for not wearing the right clothes when he went to the cenotaph, supposedly, which was ludicrous at the time, or not bowing his head sufficiently. These people have a genuine problem. They have taken vast sums of money from very rich people whilst being on very big salaries, while supporting policies which objectively impose hardship on struggling people. And if you're going to stare pensioners in the face and say, we're going to take tough decisions, which means you are paying tough decisions, people expected to cough up when they don't have anything to cough up. When you are a rich politician taking vast freebies, which you don't need to do, it's not part of your job to do that, then you're going to expect people are going to get angry about it, whatever the Daily Mail opportunistically jumps on it, whether they jump on it or not. People are not robots. And that has gone down like a cup of sick, because most people are sick of being asked over and over again by politicians, Conservative, now Labour, to keep making sacrifices. Just one more sacrifice and then prosperity be around the corner. We've heard that now for 14 years. And if you're going to behave like that while taking vast freebies, obviously people get angry, whatever the Daily Mail says.
If it wasn't enough to get Rosie Duffield absolutely cooking Keir Starmer and his faction into mincemeat, you've had Owen Jones then devouring it as well. He's absolutely smashed it. He's 100% right. He's 100% right. And I remember in his video he did with Curtis on the Turn Left channel about the Labour right, when he has publicly left the Labour Party, he described these people as being the worst people that you've ever met. It's like horrible, horrible people who are also incredibly weird. And I couldn't ask for a better description of the Labour right. Just genuinely kind of sociopathic people. I think you have to be like that, essentially, to sacrifice the livelihoods of 250,000 children to settle 10-year-old party beef. But There you go. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.